President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Joko Widodo, and Prime Minister of the Republic of Singapore, His Excellency Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, Excellencies, the Minister of Indonesia, and Excellencies, the Ministers of the Republic of Singapore. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, now we will hear the joint statement from both the country leader. Firstly, we would like to invite the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Joko Widodo.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
May peace be upon us all.
Pertama-tama saya ingin
Allow me to
menyampaikan
first start by
selamat datang kembali di
welcoming
Indonesia kepada PM Lee Hsien
PM
Loong
Lee Hsien Loong
dan delegasi.
and his delegation.
Pertemuan saya dan PM Lee
In my
membahas
meeting with
upaya
PM Lee, we discussed efforts to strengthen bilateral cooperation in various areas, particularly on economic ties,
tukar pandangan
and
mengenai
exchange views
berbagai
on
isu di kawasan.
various issues in the region.
Pertama, penguatan
First,
kerjasama pemulihan
strengthening
ekonomi.
cooperation on
Singapura
economic
merupakan
recovery.
investor
Singapore is
terbesar di
the largest
Indonesia.
foreign investor in Indonesia.
Investasi Singapura di
Singapore's
Indonesia pada
investment in
Januari
Indonesia
sampai
from
September
January to September
2021
2021
senilai
amounted to
7.3
$7.3 billion US dollars.
Pertemuan retreat
The leaders' retreat noted
adanya investasi baru
that there are
senilai
new investments worth $9.2 billion US dollars, among others in the areas of new and renewable energy
sekitar Batam serta
around Batam, as well as Sumba Island and West Manggarai
serta
in East Nusa Tenggara, as well as the construction of a logistics hub at Tanjung Priok
investasi
Port.
di bidang energi dan
Investment in energy and new and renewable energy continues to be the priority of the Indonesian government in promoting green and sustainable economy, to support investment climate in green industries. During the leaders' retreat, both countries have signed the MOU on energy cooperation, as well as the MOU on green and circular economy development cooperation. Moreover, in order to continuously maintain financial and monetary stability to support economic recovery, several agreements have also been signed, including the MOU on financial cooperation, and in November 2021, the local currency bilateral swap agreement and the bilateral repo line cooperation have been extended for another year. I also hope that the MOU between our central banks on payment innovation, anti-money laundering issues, as well as the prevention of terrorism financing could be signed very soon. In addition, in order to support the safe mobility of people, both countries are currently in the final stages of finalizing the cooperation on mutual recognition of vaccines, as well as synergizing the interoperability of platforms for tracing and safety of the two countries. Second, on politics, law and security, I warmly welcome the agreement reached between our two countries, the exchange of letters between the Coordinating Minister for Maritime and Investment Affairs of Indonesia and the Coordinating Minister for National Security of Singapore, and the agreement on the Treaty on Extradition of Fugitives, the agreement on Flight Information Region, and the joint statement between the Ministers of Defense on the commitment to enforce the Defense Cooperation Agreement. Regarding the Treaty for the Extradition of Fugitives, within this new treaty, the retroactive period is extended from 15 years to 18 years, in accordance with Article 78 of the Indonesian Criminal Code. Meanwhile, by signing the agreement on FIR, the scope of Jakarta FIR will cover all of Indonesia's territorial airspace, particularly in the waters around Riau and Natuna Islands. Going forward, we hope that the cooperation in law enforcement, aviation safety, as well as defense and security of the two countries could continue to be strengthened based on the principles of mutual benefit.
Kerjasama
Third,
pendidikan dan
on
pengembangan
education
sumber daya
and
manusia.
human resources
Kerjasama di
development
bidang
cooperation.
ini telah menjadi
The cooperation
komitmen
on
kedua
human
negara
resources have been the
sejak
commitment of the
beberapa
two
tahun yang
countries
lalu.
since
Untuk tahun
several years back.
2022 akan
For
dilakukan
2022, we will
pelatihan
carry out
SDM
human
antara
resources
Singapura
training
dan
between Singapore and
pemerintah
the
Provinsi Kepulauan Riau
Riau Island
untuk
provincial
menguatkan
government to
kapasitas di
improve
bidang
capacity in the
food
field
industry
of food industry
4.0 dan
4.0
supply chains.
as well as supply chains.
Kerjasama seperti ini
This
dapat
type of
dikembangkan
cooperation could
lebih
be
lanjut
further
di
expanded
berbagai daerah.
in other
Untuk
regions.
skala lebih
And
besar,
on a
saya
larger
menyambut baik
scale, I
rencana
welcome the
penandatanganan
plan to sign
MOU
the
on
MOU on
Capital
Human Capital Partnership
Arrangement.
Arrangement.
MOU ini
This
akan
MOU will
memperkuat
bolster
kerjasama
our
riset dan
research
penguatan
collaboration,
kelembagaan
strengthening
dan pertukaran
institutional
mahasiswa
aspect as well as
dalam
student
rangka
exchange in
memperkokoh
order to
konsep
bolster
kampus
our
merdeka di
concept
Indonesia.
of Campus Merdeka or
Terakhir,
independent campus in
PM Lee
Indonesia.
dan saya juga
Finally,
melakukan
PM Lee and I
tukar
also
pandangan
exchange
mengenai
views
beberapa
on
isu kawasan.
several regional issues. Indonesia and Singapore share a common view on the importance of strengthening
cara kerja dan kelembagaan
ASEAN working
agar
methods
ASEAN siap menghadapi
and institution
berbagai
and
tantangan
unity
di
so
masa
that ASEAN is
depan.
prepared to face future
Mengenai Myanmar,
challenges.
kita sangat
On
prihatin
Myanmar,
melihat
we are
perkembangan situasi
concerned
di
with
Myanmar.
the development of the
Indonesia dan
situation in
Singapura
Myanmar.
memiliki pandangan
Indonesia
yang
and
sama
Singapore share the same view
pentingnya
on the importance of
pelaksanaan
implementing
5-point
the
consensus.
five-point consensus.
ini merupakan
This consensus
keputusan
is a
ASEAN
decision
pada tingkat tinggi
that ASEAN has
dan
taken
harus
at the highest
dihormati
level
oleh
and should
semua.
be upheld
Kita
by
juga
all.
sepakat
We
bahwa
also agree
keselamatan dan
that the
kesejahteraan
safety
rakyat
and
Myanmar
well-being
terus
of the
menjadi
people of
perhatian
Myanmar
utama.
continue to
Oleh karena
be
itu, bantuan
the
kemanusiaan
priority.
perlu
Therefore,
terus didorong dan
humanitarian
dikembangkan
assistance should
tanpa
continue to be
diskriminasi.
called
Saya
for
juga
and provided
menyampaikan
without
mengenai
discrimination.
pentingnya penguatan
I also
kelembagaan
conveyed
ASEAN agar
the
ASEAN
importance
lebih
of
tangguh
strengthening
dan
ASEAN's
mampu
institution
merespon
so that
berbagai
ASEAN could be more
tantangan baru
resilient
di
and
masa
able to
mendatang.
respond to new
Sekali
challenges
lagi,
in future
terima kasih
times.
PM Lee atas
Once again, thank you very
pertemuan yang
much,
sangat
PM Lee, for the very constructive
konstruktif ini.
meeting.
Dan sekarang
Now,
kemudian
allow
saya
me to
bertanya
invite
kepada
His
Republik
Excellency
Singapura.
Prime Minister of Singapore to also share his thoughts. Please, Prime Minister. I thank you.
Your Excellency President Joko Widodo, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank President Jokowi for his very warm hospitality to me and my delegation. Bintan is an apt venue for the Singapore-Indonesia Leaders Retreat, given the strong economic and people-to-people links between Singapore and Riau Islands province of Kepri. This is my 5th Leaders Retreat with President Jokowi. Our last one was held in Singapore in 2019. Typically, we hold the Leaders Retreat annually, but the pandemic disrupted our plans. Notwithstanding, the President and I have kept in touch regularly. Most recently, we met in October in Rome while attending the G20 summit. But it is still important for us to resume the Leaders Retreat because it is a key platform to discuss and make progress on our bilateral agenda. I'm therefore most grateful to the President and his officials for making these excellent arrangements to host my delegations and me. Today, our bilateral relations take a major step forward. I'm very happy that the President and I have just witnessed the signing of a balanced set of agreements that addresses 3 long-standing bilateral issues between Singapore and Indonesia: the flight information region, the defense cooperation, and the extradition of fugitives. These 3 issues are important to our 2 countries. They've been on our bilateral agenda for several decades. We've worked together and discussed them many times before. At our previous Leaders Retreat, President Jokowi and I decided that it was time to decisively settle these long-standing bilateral issues. We endorsed a framework which would address the needs and interests of both sides. We tasked Coordinating Minister Pak Luhut Panchaitan and Senior Minister and Coordinating Minister Teo Chee Hean to follow up with detailed negotiations. I'm very glad that we have now achieved what we set out to do. Our 2 sides have reached agreement on these long-standing bilateral matters. When implemented, the FIR agreement will meet the civil aviation needs of both countries and uphold the safety and efficiency of air traffic in a manner consistent with ICAO rules. The Defense Cooperation Agreement will strengthen cooperation between our armed forces and advance our defense relations. The Extradition Treaty will enhance cooperation in combating crime and send a clear, positive signal to investors. In addition, we exchanged letters to agree that these three agreements will enter into force simultaneously. What remains will be for both countries to complete our domestic processes to ratify and bring the set of agreements into force. The conclusion of these agreements demonstrates the strength and maturity of Singapore-Indonesia relations. These agreements take into account both parties' interests, represent a good balance of benefits, and are durable agreements for the long haul, designed to last for at least a generation, and create a solid foundation to move bilateral relations forward with confidence and trust. I thank President Jokowi for his leadership and vision, which have brought about this very positive outcome. I also thank Pak Luhut, SMTO, and the officials on both sides for their tireless work and their shared determination to make progress on these long-standing bilateral issues. I encourage the ministers and officials to maintain close cooperation and coordination and implement the agreements expeditiously. President Jokowi and I also discussed the resumption of cross-border travel. Indonesia has resumed tourism travel from Singapore to Bintan and Batam. It implemented a travel bubble to Bintan and Batam, and Singapore will discuss with Indonesia how we can make this bidirectional. And we hope without taking too long. President Jokowi and I agreed to continue discussions also to expand air and sea travel more generally to more destinations in Indonesia. But we have to take into account the COVID situation and in particular the outbreak of the Omicron variant, and we will do so at a pace that both sides are comfortable with, taking into account our respective public health situations. We also reviewed our ongoing bilateral cooperation. As the President noted, Singapore has consistently been Indonesia's top foreign investor since 2014, and despite the pandemic, our investments have grown. At the last Leaders' Retreat, we signed a bilateral investment treaty which has entered into force. This will build investor confidence and contribute to economic growth and jobs growth. And the Kendal Industrial Park, which President and I jointly opened at our 2016 retreat, is doing well. It has attracted $1.6 billion in investments and will create many thousands of jobs. Our finance ministries and central banks are also strengthening institutional linkages to deepen financial cooperation. And Singapore and Indonesia are at the same time, besides these existing areas, also exploring new areas of collaboration, such as sustainability, the green economy, the digital economy, and human capital development. And I'm happy that our officials are already meeting to discuss cooperation on sustainability. We have formalized cooperation on green and circular economy development, on energy cooperation and exchanges between our students and educators. We also discussed regional developments, in particular Myanmar, where the situation remains serious. We noted that no significant progress has been made implementing ASEAN's 5-point consensus since it was adopted in Jakarta in April last year. We are committed to help Myanmar reach a durable and peaceful resolution in the interest of its people. But it is essential for the ASEAN chair and his special envoy to engage all parties involved. We also need to see progress in the delivery of humanitarian assistance. Singapore will continue to work with the ASEAN chair Cambodia and the next chair, which is Indonesia, and as well as other ASEAN member states on the full implementation of the 5-point consensus and other relevant decisions. I also thank President Jokowi for inviting Singapore to this year's G20 meetings. We look forward to supporting Indonesia's G20 chairmanship and making it a success. We are very grateful that Jokowi has hosted a successful and fruitful leaders' retreat. It shows that our bilateral relationship is in good working order. Our two countries are able to work together in challenging circumstances and resolve long-standing issues in an open and constructive manner. I'm confident that we will build on these strong foundations and develop new areas of collaborations to benefit future generations, and look forward to working closely with the President to take our bilateral relations to greater heights. Terima kasih. Thank you.